Now we're going to go into the actual training. So what's happened is Toastmaster International has come up with new format of training. And a lot of it falls under the Successful Club program or Success program, which we're going to go into a little bit later. The VP of Education has they've come up with a complete slides and manuals and books and everything associated with this. Again, all available on Toastmasters International. The important thing here is you've got my name. Please write it down. And I'll just pause briefly for you to write down that email address, because any questions you have, or anything you need help with that we didn't properly answer today, and I will allow time for questions, you will have the opportunity to contact me on that email address. So please, if you want to write it down, go ahead. All right. There are three major roles or major parts of being a VPE. You have the role of the VPE, the responsibilities of the VPE, and all the resources that are available to you. The role is all about being responsible for the education program and making sure that you take care of each and every member of your club. That is the role. But the responsibilities is much broader. You're responsible for the club meeting itself and things that go on beyond the club meeting and your engagement with the executive committee. If you remember, I showed you on that little chart a while ago, there was an executive committee that showed you the VPM, VPPR, and so on. Those are the members of the executive committee run by the president. So the first part of that then we said was the club meeting. So you have, as far as a club meeting is concerned, you have before the club meeting, upon arrival at the club meeting, and during the club meeting. So you have those three areas that you need to be focused on. So what do you do before the club meeting? Now, there's a lot of things you do, and we only have an hour to get, we have less than an hour to get this done. So I'm going to just hit the highlights as we go through this. You need to be scheduling the roles. You're responsible to go out there and make sure you find people to fill the roles, if possible, before the meeting. And at least get those senior roles. Get that Toastmaster role, get the general evaluator role, definitely those speaker evaluators. You really need to get those lined up beforehand if possible, especially if you know who your speakers are. And also, the Toastmaster is usually a different person at each meeting. So that Toastmaster needs support. And to encourage our members in the clubs to step up to be Toastmaster or any officer role, it's really helpful for them to know that they're going to get the support. And the person they're going to look to most for that is going to be the person that organizes the meeting. And the person that organizes the meeting is the VPE. Then the last thing there before the club on this particular slide is to prepare for the speeches. So the speakers need help. And if you remember earlier during the presentation on pathways and so on, people talked about making sure that you get the evaluation form to the speakers. And making sure you've got the time of the speech, the title of the speech, the bio for the speaker. You want to have all of that done and all of that ready and all of that sent to the Toastmaster ahead of time. So when the Toastmaster introduces the speaker, they know who the speaker is, the length of the speech for the timer, and they also know the name of the speech, the title of the speech. You need to encourage before the meeting pathways speeches. Not all speeches are pathways. And it's sometimes very difficult to get people to start that first icebreaker speech. And your job is to somehow or other encourage them to do that. And Toastmasters has a lot of material in pathways to help you as the VPE to encourage people to speak. You also need to notify the club president of any education awards. So each time someone has completed a level within a path, they need to be recognized. So if it's level 1 in your first path, and you've done those first things about presentation, evaluation, icebreaker, in the reverse order, if you've done those, then you've achieved your level 1. Now you get that recognition. And I'm going to show you a slide in a minute about how that you do those 2 things that we've talked about a lot in the Pathways presentation. And this particular slide I'm going to show you is very, very helpful about how you do that. So you would notify Toastmasters International and in Basecamp. And all of that is your job. Then there's the Successful Club series. That's the thing I was mentioning right at the very beginning about successful clubs. There is now from Toastmasters a whole ton of information on this Successful Club series. Now I'm going to briefly review it if we have enough time. Upon arrival at the club meetings, now you've done your preparation work and you've arrived at the club meeting. And when I finished and done arrival and during the meeting and a couple of other things, then I'm going to ask you if you have any questions, so please bear with me. So upon arrival at the club meeting, you need to verify that any assigned members, so those are the people with roles, including the speakers, they've arrived and they're prepared. They may need your help. There may be something they don't understand. They maybe don't have a form to fill out. They maybe don't know what the timer role is. All of these things you kind of want to help them with. And then you want to match your evaluators to the speakers. Well, obviously, you've probably chosen your evaluators before the meeting, but you want to now go back and make sure the evaluator, think of in terms now of in-person and hybrid meetings, and obviously online meetings, that you've matched who the speaker is to the evaluator, and they are prepared. They know they've got the title of the speech, the time of the speech, and they've got the evaluation form. And then, of course, continue to assist the Toastmaster throughout. Greet the guests. Now, this applies to all officers in the club. But you, being the VPE officer, it's also important that you greet the guests. And that's your opportunity to encourage people to begin their path and pathways, and your opportunity to congratulate those who have moved through pathways and are progressing. Inform the table topics master if there are any guests that are willing to participate. So as we know, in a lot of meetings, some meetings, they really encourage guests to get involved. Others don't do so much of that. But most importantly, you want to make sure a guest is prepared to speak. So especially in person, you could ask them if they would like to contribute to the meeting in any way in terms of being part of table topics. And then during the club meetings, cover pathways and the status of the pathways for the members. So this is your opportunity in front of other members or one-on-one with the individual member to talk about the opportunities within pathways for them to go to the next step. And of course, continue to recognize members for achievements. Most clubs have the president talk about the achievement itself and present any awards. But of course, you assist the president in doing that task. Preside over the meeting when necessary. Being the VPE, you are the second senior officer in the club. So you have the president and then the VPE. So naturally, and that's why a lot of agendas will say presiding officer, not necessarily president. The presiding officer, the person who is present, and the most senior is the person that runs the meeting. So be prepared at all times that you may need to be running that meeting. Well, of course, if you set the agenda and you plan the meeting, you're naturally ready to do so. Answer any education program questions that people will have. And people will bring those up during the meeting. And lastly, the contest questions. So we have speech contests at least twice a year. And don't forget, they're at the area level, the division level, and of course, initially at the club level, and then at the district level, regional, and so on. Your job is to help and work with your club to get the speakers for the contest and so on. I've got a few more notes on that later. Outside of the actual club meeting. So now you've that we've talked about the club meeting itself. Now we're moving on to the outside that club meeting. What goes on beyond just the club meeting? Well, of course, planning the club meetings themselves. We talked about that. Promote participation in the education program, primarily in pathways. But don't forget, if somebody's going to become a distinguished Toastmaster, they go beyond just the pathways itself. They go to do other things, including youth leadership programs, coaching, and those kind of things. So those are beyond just the pathways. And you need to be familiar with some of those things. And they are all out there, all in Toastmaster International. Orientate new members. That is so important. We always in our clubs make guests welcome, make new members very welcome, but we also need to orientate them towards pathways, towards the way the club meeting works, and beyond that, just make sure they feel that's part of the club. That's your job, to make sure they're really part of the club. And encourage new members to participate. Now, that's sometimes very difficult because you don't want to overdo that. You want to do it in a way that they feel like they are engaged, but not forced to be engaged. So you have to be very careful and gentle how you persuade them. Assigning a mentor. This is something that a lot of clubs struggle with because everyone's so busy, everyone's got so many things to do. But each person, as they join a club, should be assigned a mentor within that club to help and guide them through. So it doesn't all fall on the VPE or anyone else. Attend the club executive committee meetings. So at least twice a year, but hopefully more, clubs run executive committee meetings, which is that executive committee we've already talked about. You are a member of that committee. So please make sure you try and attend those club meetings. They are so important. And from there, the club will develop its success plan, the club success plan, and that is how the club sets its goals as part of the Distinguished Club program. Attend district council meetings. District 63 has a number of council meetings throughout the year, once a month usually. And those council meetings are usually in the evening, and they're attended by everyone around that district that has an officer role, usually area directors and those kind of things, but you are encouraged to attend also.
Recording in progress.
Sorry? Somebody was speaking, or maybe it was just a statement. Council meetings can also be area and division meetings. So if you look at your guidebook for the manual that Toastmaster International issues for VPE, they also talk about setting up meetings, both the area director sets up meetings at an area director level and a division level. So some of these meetings you could be useful to attend. Outside club meeting, facilitating members' progress on Basecamp. So Basecamp is where you monitor the progress of people's path through pathways. Your job is to manage that Basecamp. You are basically the Basecamp manager for the club. Arrange for your replacement. So at least a month before the end of June each year, so you're now July 1st starting as VPE, right on the month before the end of your period, you need to be considering your replacement, probably much before that, 3 months before that. Continue to talk to people in the club to find somebody who may be interested, and then prepare that person for the office of Vice President of Education. The executive committee, they meet to discuss issues around the club, prepare different things and roles and aspects of the club. But what your role is to talk about the education program by providing reports as to how the club is doing in pathways, because pathways is a very significant part of the Distinguished Club program. And the Distinguished Club program is a complex program in itself, and I do have some information on that for you. But your role in that is purely around the VPE aspects of it. So make sure that you are monitoring pathways and seeing if you're meeting those goals that BCP sets for the club. And share information on upcoming speech contests. So remember, your club's going to have at least 2 contests a year, in the spring and in the fall. And those contests, you're kind of responsible to put that together for your club, and certainly get as much help as you need, but you're responsible to get it all together. Now, speech contests, as I mentioned, are club, area, division, district, and beyond. You're responsible at the club level. However, you can also attend the contest, the speech contest beyond the club as a volunteer and a guest. I want to make sure you know that. So you're responsible for the club level, but when it comes to area, division, and so on, it is expected that clubs provide members who can volunteer and help with those. And being the VPE, you're well placed to do a lot of good work at these other contests. And prepare your speakers for the actual contest. And there is a rule book for that contest, which, by the way, keep an eye out, gets updated quite regularly. I don't think it's been updated in 2021, but we definitely have a 2020 version of the contest rule book. Now, the resources. So we've talked about the role, we've talked about the responsibilities, and now we have what the resources are available to you as a VPE. First of all, attend your district-sponsored club officer training. That's what you're doing today. And thank you very much for being here. There are 2 of those each year. You're doing this one right now, and then you're going to do another one in the winter. And so each time, this is like the summer, and there's a winter, just in December around that time frame. And then, of course, the next one next year will be for the incoming officers next time. Keep up to date with all the Toastmaster material. Please be aware that Toastmasters constantly updates material and has different documents and revisions. It's your job to be up to date with that. And the way to do that is to, every now and then, when you go on the Toastmaster site, international site, just navigate around and get a feel for what's going on and look for what's new. Keep up to date with the materials. As I said, meet with outgoing executive committee. So this is now getting started in your role and the resources. So part of the resources is getting the information and leveraging information from the executive committee, getting tips, getting ideas. Meet with the outgoing VPE, find out some of the issues they have, some of the suggestions they have for you, and meet, of course, with your current executive committee. Now, I added something. What Toastmasters says is to invite 1 or 3 members to serve on an education committee. I kind of added something in there saying based on size of club, because a lot of clubs have only got a few people, and those clubs really struggle to, now you got to do extra things. So if you've got a club that's, especially a DCP level club at 20 members plus, you kind of want to have a little bit of help around the VPE, because it's a very big task. So form a little bit of a committee to help you do your job. And then make sure you meet with each member to discuss their education goals. So these are the list of resources that come right out of Toastmasters International. I can assure you, if you navigate the site, and some of the things I'm going to show you in a second, you're going to see there's a lot of material that will help you. And it can be very confusing. But these, I'm not going to go through them, but don't forget all of this. I haven't mentioned this, actually. I need to mention it right now. All of this material you see today, I'm going to put on a Dropbox, and then I'm going to get you a link to the Dropbox so you can have access to all this material. And if it also ends up some other way within Toastmasters International, then within District 63, then you will also access that way. So the first part of this session today has now been concluded. Again, there's my name, there's my link, and I now open it to any questions, and I'm also going to look for chat and see what the questions are.
I have a question. Ken, that was a great presentation, but I don't know if I missed it, but I want to know if a copy of this would be sent to the attendants today.
Yes. So what I did, and great question from you. Thank you very much. What I did is I did what I call a screen capture of everyone. So I kind of have all the attendees and your names there. I'll also get that list, hopefully, from the main attendance list. And then what I'll be doing is sending you all a Dropbox link to all of this information, because the presentation is just one small piece of the information that I have available.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm just trying to see if there's any questions here on.
Ken, you had a number of questions in the chat about seeing the dashboard and what it looks like as far as what the VPE can see, and can they track members?
Yes, I do have, I think I have something on that. Can we hold that in a holding pattern until I get a bit further on? I think I may have something that would be helpful there. Or the other way is we can log on to Toastmasters and see if we can do it that way.
I've got one question, Ken.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Regarding like greeting guests and everything, I understand that that's the important part of the role, but if we're still doing things virtually, I'm finding that to be, or I'm anticipating that to be a challenge if we're still conducting meetings virtually. So I wanted to know if there were any tips or anything from the team that we could use to kind of know who the guests will be in advance. So maybe we could reach out to them before the meeting. But if we just show up to the meeting and they're guests, it's kind of difficult to do that in a virtual environment.
Yeah, great question, Chris. So what I can do is share with you how our club does it, and we're the Downtown Dazzlers Club, is what I belong to in Chattanooga. And what our club does is the VPE works very closely with the membership, Vice President of Membership and Public Relations. And what happens is they will be saying, well, such and such is going to come to the meeting. So I'll get an email and they'll say a certain person is coming to the meeting. And what we do is immediately reach out to them to make sure they've got the login information and welcome them to the club. But because the membership is doing all of that normally, your job as VPE is to kind of tie them into the meeting itself and to really make sure they attend that first meeting. And then when they've arrived at the meeting, to ensure that they are welcomed. And of course, the president, depending on the club, in our case, usually the president is really looking out for guests and making sure that they are introduced. And then what you want to do is encourage them to introduce themselves, if possible, as to who they are. You know, have they been in Toastmasters before, that kind of thing. So that way you're kind of opening up that greeting by creating a sort of an initial relationship. Has anyone got any other suggestion? Okay. Is there any other questions other than what we talked about, the navigating on the Basecamp? Okay, I'm going to move on, if that's okay. So here is a summary of the role. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show it to you that it's there, and this will be available to you again in the Dropbox. So it tells you what your responsibilities are. It's a one-page document and the skills that are learned. And it has, just I mentioned earlier today about how there's a number for every document and when it was last issued. Okay, that's one thing. Here's something else. This is Pathways Core Competencies. And I encourage you to have this document and share this with all of your members, because it's such a great one-page summary. And then it gets into detail about each of the 11 parts. So my job today is not to go through pathways, because we're doing the VPE role as opposed to pathways. But this is a great summary for you and your members as to what pathways is all about, giving you the competencies, where they match up to the individual paths. You see 1 through 5, 1 through 5, and then it goes through each and every path and what it's all about. So it's just a fantastic tool for you. So share that one, that will also be there for you. And then here is a nice little secret document that we have available. And it shows you, if you look at it, it says member in this top section, pathway system itself here, the VPE, that's you in here, and Toastmasters International. And it shows you how when they begin, the member begins pathways, when they submit a level completion, remember I talked about level 1, that's when the emails start flowing. The email system, the system itself emails the club contact to approve the progression, because the member finished. Remember they said about doing that second assessment? And when you did that second self-assessment and you finished and completed, then this gets sent off and that email goes to you. You get the message to go in and do the completion. And it's a two-step. You've got to do it at the international level to get the award and get recognition for your club, because remember DCP, Distinguished Club Program. And then over here, you want to make sure that the base camp, BCM, is also processed. So there's a two-step process, and then it comes back here to show completion and back to the recognition to the member. And then Toastmaster International updates your DCP right here. That's your Distinguished Club Program. So it's a nice little flow chart for you. It's available. Now, I also want to mention that there is the Club Leadership Handbook. And the Club Leadership Handbook is a great handbook for you to understand the context of VPE within the club, the whole club, your role, everyone else's role, and how the club is meant to work. Please make sure you keep this handy. It tells you everything I told you, or am telling you today, but much more as well. It gets into all sorts of fantastic, useful information. Again, we're not going to dwell on that. And just bear with me here. I want to make sure I'm tracking correctly. Distinguished Club Program. Let's have a look at this one. All right. So the Distinguished Club Program, there's a manual on that, which I'm sharing with you here. And this is where the club has different goals they've got to meet. And let's just go back up in here. I'm going to get it so it's bigger. Let me close this and try opening it again. I wanted to see if I can get a page that will show that's all about completing it. But what you're going to do with the Distinguished Club Program is meet the various goals that have been assigned to your club that you need to meet. And those goals, they show it right in here. So if I can just do this, there's your membership, for example. And it shows you, you're meant to have 20 members for a distinguished club. And so when you get to 20, it shows you right here and it shows you the date or to date. And so what you're trying to do is get to 20 members. So that's one of the goals, just one of the goals. But a lot of the goals are education, and they're right down here, where it shows you Distinguished Club Program goals. And it says, it's hard to read, but I'm just going to read it out to you, that you need to have, for example, 4 level 1 awards, 2 level 2 awards, 2 more level 2 awards. And you don't have to have all of these. You have to have enough to be able to reach that goal that's been set to you. and each time you get one of these, you get a recognition. And once you get the recognition, if you have sufficient, then you get to become a distinguished club. And there's your DTM level 5 and so on. So there's all these different ones. There's a training one. So there's 10 altogether, 1 through 10. There's membership, 7 and 8, training, and then administration, making sure you're paying your dues on time as a club. So your role as VPE is this education piece right here. And the training is really the TLI, which is you're at today. If you do that twice a year, then you've achieved that goal and you get recognition for 9. So of course, if you get 10, you're like the top of the grade as far as clubs are concerned, and you get the platinum award. I've forgotten what the actual one is, but the you get all the way through here, you get 6 or more, or 7, and you're in good shape. I'm just trying to see if there's any more here that's very... Anyway, I'm going to keep moving because there's a lot to cover, but that's all about the Distinguished Club Program and how it works. 2. This is something about speech contests. Remember we talked about speech contests and how they occur twice a year. These speech contests there's a manual that covers everything about conducting a speech contest. And remember, you've got to do that at a club level, and things happen slightly different at the club level than they do at the area level and again at the division and the district. So you've got to really make sure you understand how that works, and here's the manual to cover that. So keep that handy. It's ready for you. Keep all what I send you in the folder in Dropbox. You can keep it on your own computer. Just download the whole thing. Now, these next few documents are all about online meetings, which you could say, well, that's a sergeant-at-arms role. But I just kind of wanted to share with you because there's a lot of fluidity in online meetings nowadays. And it's really helpful for you as a VPE to help the sergeant-at-arms and anyone else as to how you conduct online meetings. So there's a bunch of tips here that Toastmasters has put out to help you, the timer and all the role players and so on in the club when you're doing online meetings. So very useful little document right there. Then there's also the same thing, but a guide for the club officers. So it's very specific for you as the VPE. This is a very useful guide. You got that one. Then we have, this is a useful one too, where if you are going and moving over to software or changing your software, and it tells you each software, what type it is, and how that best supports for online meetings. So this is for the online version of the meeting. If you go into a hybrid club, you're obviously going to need that as well. And then we have an online infographic, which Toastmasters has put out, which is great to tell you the kind of things you should and shouldn't do for an online Toastmaster meeting. And of course, I think a lot of us have now gone through that growing process where we already know a lot of this stuff, but it's a useful infographic to share with your club and club members. Then I have here recording your contest. So if this is a document that tells you about video recording, because what you have to do is you have to have permission from anyone who's at that meeting that's being recorded. You need to make sure that you have their permission to do a recording. So if you're recording anything, and a speech contest especially, make sure you get that. And it gives you all the rules, how to do it, what to do. So if you're going to record your club contest, this is a great guide for you, your speech contest. Right, now we're going to ask if there's any questions. And I just want to mention before we do that though, hybrid meetings. Hybrid meetings are now starting to happen more and more and more. And I've started one in our area that's going on with a corporate club, and they are actually doing it in their conference room. We're starting with our own club on July 7th, and we're using a facility downtown Chattanooga, and we are also having it with the online capability as well as in person. So I encourage you all to be thinking about that. And as information comes out, you'll find it on Toastmaster International. There is information about hybrid meetings. And then before we go to Successful Club Series, I open it to any more questions. And did I answer enough about the DCP? Sorry, not DCP, the Basecamp. You want me to try to go on Toastmasters and show it to you? We've got 15 minutes. Any
that would be
questions?
good. At least showing the approval. You probably have time to show the approval process if you have a
Yeah, let's
at least where that is.
yeah, okay. Let me go on see if I can get online here.
And Ken, also while you're there, if you don't mind showing us how to do a quick glance at the members to see what level they're at.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Let me, I've got to log in here. You got to all be patient with me. Come on. No, don't ask me. There it is. Oh God, it wants one of these things again. No, that's traffic lights. Hang on. Parking meters. Anyone see a parking meter? Skip. This is fun. All right. Let's see if it's going to log me in. Come on, log me in. All right. So pathways, right? And go to Basecamp. Now we want to go in. Let's do this Leadership Central first. So you as VPE, you can go to Club Central. You'll notice there's club stuff and then district stuff and other stuff over here. So Club Central. And here it talks about membership, administration, and it talks about club achievements, club awards, demographics, membership, roster. There's your distinguished performance report that we talked about earlier. And this gives you actual, what you've achieved as an actual club. And let's go back to Club Central, profile. Hang on, I'm having a, let me go into pathways a minute. Go to Basecamp. All right, go in as, log in as Basecamp manager. So what will happen is when the approvals, if you go, I was just checking back on myself there a minute. I got into Basecamp. So you're all familiar how to get into Basecamp because you've obviously got an education qualification. And once you're in there, you know about this thing where you've got to cursor down like this to get anything in Basecamp, which you don't have to do with the other one. But what you want to do is go in there as the Basecamp manager because you now as VPE are the Basecamp manager. And I think if I remember correctly, and this is a good tip, it took 30 days before I was actually Basecamp manager after July 1st. So it took a month for Toastmaster International to get me so I could go in as Basecamp manager. And you can do nothing about that. So you kind of want to stay with the VPE that was last year. You kind of want to stay in touch with them in case you need their help to get any approvals done. Now it gives you a tutorial here. So you can see what you do. And then here's where you have the pending request. So what's happened, somebody's finished a level and they've said they've done it. And then what happens is that Toastmasters comes through Basecamp to here and there'll be a pending request. So I don't have any, but it'll be sitting in here. And it'll just say approve. And all you got to do is approve it. And once you've done that, then you're good on the Basecamp side of it.
You do need to check first and make sure they really have completed everything. If
yes, Wendy.
Just
yeah.
personally know that.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just trying to, from Zoom, but we're going back in 10 minutes. Right. Here's your member program. It says error. Normally it will give you your club members and where they're at right here. Due to volume of members conducting. Okay. Normally you'll get right there, and I'm sorry I can't show it to you, but you'll see the members and you can follow their progress and so on. I'll tell you what we could do. I'm going to try to make this so it makes more sense. Is what we could do is I have a presentation that goes through all of this stuff when I did pathways training. And what I'll do is I'll roll that into the Dropbox, so you have it. All right, so that will give you all of what you've asked today with regard to pathways, because I didn't want to go down the path of pathways and get too far off the basics of the overall role. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, and then that will show you also, I'll have in there how you go onto Toastmaster International to also log that person as having completed that particular part. Because as we've talked about, there's the two, there's Basecamp and Toastmaster International. And that's how they get their award. So you have to do that on the Toastmaster International side. Right, I'm going to move on because we've only got 8 minutes. And I apologize in advance if I didn't answer the questions on the pathways correctly or sufficiently, but I will make sure it's in here as an extra document that the training I did before. And then successful club series. I just want to share this with you. This is something I quickly put together today that just shows you the elements of a successful club series. Within this is all sorts of documents. So that you have the moment of truth, how to find new members, how to evaluate and motivate at the same time, a deal about closing the sale, making sure the club meeting is and everything about the club, its activities are done correctly. Creating the best club climate, especially for guests and new members. Meeting roles and responsibilities. Mentoring. Keeping the commitment to Toastmasters. Going beyond the actual club. And then the education program. So there's a whole bunch of stuff just within this successful club series right there. And to help you, I've got it all in here for you. Of course, I'm not going to go through all this. But there's all the documents that are associated with a successful club series. There's a whole load of them. So in other words, that's why I'm putting it on a Dropbox, because there's loads of folders in here. Now, here's the moment of truth chart. A lot of people don't know what the moment of truth is, but club quality is based on the moment of truth, and it covers your first impressions. What's the first impression of the club? Membership orientation. How do you orientate new members? Fellowship, variety, communication. What goes on in the club? Program planning, meeting, organization, membership strength, and achievement recognition. So you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but it's all about the moment of truth. Very useful one-pager for you right there. Then I encourage you finally here that this is fairly new, that whenever you do something, self-evaluate. So as you go through, do a self-evaluation. Ask other people to evaluate you as you're doing your job. This is something that's being encouraged more and more in Toastmasters from International. So again, you have that in there for you. There is a manual. And this manual is all about the role of the VPE, just the VPE. So the other one I showed you was about the club and how the club officers and everything go. This is all about you and the training for you that we've covered today. And finally, that's it. That's all I've got to share with you. Any last questions before we say we're done?
Yes, Ken, I have a question. In Pathways, I just looked at my team right now, and it doesn't show all of the members. So for the member to pop up, do they have to pick a pathway?
Yes. You need to have them. They need to be registered in Basecamp.
Okay, so that's what's happening.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And by the way, always check that's a great thing you just brought up there. Make sure that you get hold of your membership, vice president of membership, and get a current list of members. Because very often in clubs, you may have members that don't attend meetings that often, but they're actually a member and you didn't know they were a member. Now, having said that, if you're organizing the meetings and sending out the login for Zoom and all this kind of thing, you should have a list of all the members, their email addresses. But just to make sure, keep lockstep with the vice president of membership to ensure that you know who those members are, because that's how you get them on pathways and make sure that everyone's being taken care of.
And one other thing, if your member is a member of 2 clubs, you may not be able to see their information because they may be signed up in Basecamp for the other club.
Yep, that's true too. And also, if they want, and somebody check me on this because I'm not 100% sure, but if they want to talk, if they want to speak at your club and get recognition, they need to get your permission, and you then have to evaluate them and assess them, and it has to be all arranged properly for them to get recognition as for their club, having spoken at your club. Any input on that from anyone?
I believe that's still optional as a way to have a paper trail for your other projects, but I don't think it's required unless they change that.
Yeah, you just have to sign in to Basecamp for that club.
Okay.
If they're a member of 2 clubs.
Right. And I know when we've had people that have spoken at our club from other clubs, we've just had one, the last meeting, in fact, we do the evaluation and send it to them, and we don't do anything more for them.
Right.
Is there any other questions? Okay, on that, I think you all have the option on if you go to your individual, where you can actually go out of the room and go back to the main meeting. If not, you'll be taken there, I guess.